The massive crystal towers reached into the dark space like frozen lightning. Each one stood taller than most mountains, glowing with a soft blue light that never dimmed. These were the gates that connected the galaxy together, allowing ships to travel between star systems in the blink of an eye. The Zephyrian hegemony had controlled these gates for 3,000 years. They were tall, proud creatures with scales that changed color with their moods and large eyes that could see things others could not. Their minds could touch thoughts across vast distances, and they believed this made them special. They believed it made them worthy to guard the ancient gates. High Custodian Vextalar stood before the largest viewing screen in the command center, watching the steady flow of ships moving through the gate network. His scales shifted from deep blue to silver as he thought about the responsibility his people carried. The gates were not built by the Zephyrians. They were left behind by an ancient race that had vanished long ago, leaving only these mysterious structures behind. "Another request for gate access," reported Commander Zix then, approaching with a data pad in his clawed hands. "The species calls themselves humans. They come from a small system near the outer rim." Vextalar took the pad and studied the information. The humans were bipedal creatures, much like many other species they had encountered. They had no visible psychic abilities, used primitive chemical rockets for space travel, and their weapons were simple energy beams. Nothing impressive. Grant them access to 3 minor trade gates, Vextalar decided. The usual restrictions apply. They may use gates 7, 15, and 23 only. No access to core systems or military routes. This was the standard. Treatment for new species. The Zephyrians had learned to be careful over the centuries. They had seen too many young races destroy themselves when given too much power too quickly. It was better to let them prove themselves worthy before granting greater privileges. But there was one gate that no species was ever allowed to approach. In the heart of Zephyrian space stood the Forbidden Gate, a massive structure of black crystal that pulsed with angry red and purple light. Unlike the other gates that hummed with steady energy, this one seemed to writhe and twist, as if something dark lived within its depths. The space around the Forbidden Gate was a graveyard. Hundreds of ships from dozens of species floated there, their crews long dead, their hulls twisted into impossible shapes. Some vessels looked like they had been turned inside out. Others seemed to phase in and out of reality, never quite solid, never quite gone. Vextalar had seen the records of what lay beyond that gate. His ancestors had sent their bravest explorers through it, back when the hegemony was young and foolish. The few who returned spoke of a realm where reality itself was broken, where time moved in circles, and where things existed that should not exist. They called it the Nexus Void, and they declared it forbidden to all. The survivors of those early expeditions had all gone mad within months of their return. They spoke of vast cities that built themselves, of machines that thought with minds too large for any single being to understand, and of experiments that had torn holes in the fabric of space itself. The gate builders, they claimed, had destroyed themselves, trying to become something more than what they were. "Sir," Zix then interrupted his thoughts. "The human ambassador has arrived for the formal greeting ceremony." Vextalar straightened his formal robes and made his way to the reception hall. The room was designed to impress visiting species with its high ceilings, flowing waterfalls, and holographic displays showing the might of the Zephyrian fleet. Most ambassadors were suitably awed by the display. The human who entered was smaller than Vextalar had expected. She had dark skin, short, gray hair, and wore a simple blue uniform with no decorations. Her name was Ambassador Chen, according to the files, and she moved with a quiet confidence that seemed oddly familiar. "Welcome to Zephyrian space," Vextalar said, his voice carrying the formal weight of 3 millennia of tradition. "I am High Custodian Vextalar, guardian of the Gate Network and protector of galactic peace. Ambassador Chen bowed politely. Thank you for granting us access to your Gate Network, High Custodian. Humanity is honored to join the galactic community. You understand the restrictions, Vextaler continued. 3 gates only, for trade and peaceful exploration. Any attempt to breach these limits will result in the immediate revocation of your privileges. Of course, Chen replied, though I am curious about the gate network itself. The engineering must be remarkable. How do they function? What power source drives them? Vextaler's scales flickered with mild annoyance. Most species asked about trade routes and profit margins. Few showed interest in the technical aspects of the gates. The gates respond to psychic energy, he explained. Only those with mental, discipline, and spiritual purity can operate them safely. This is why we must carefully screen all users. Chen nodded thoughtfully. Fascinating. And the large black gate we passed on our way here? It seemed different. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Vextalar's scales turned dark red, a clear sign of agitation. That gate is forbidden to all. It leads to a realm of madness and death. No ship has ever returned safely from beyond its threshold. You will stay far away from it if you value your lives. Understood, Chen said, but there was something in her eyes that made Vextaler uncomfortable. It was the look of someone who had just been told about something very interesting. The meeting concluded with the usual formalities. Trade agreements were signed, communication protocols were established, and the humans were officially welcomed as a client species of the hegemony. Chen thanked the High Custodian for his time and departed with her small delegation. But as Vextalar watched the human shuttle disappear into the distance, he felt a strange unease. There had been something in the way Chen looked at him when he mentioned the Forbidden Gate. It reminded him of the expression his own people wore when they discovered a new puzzle to solve. He dismissed the feeling. Humans were just another young species, limited by their lack of psychic ability and primitive technology. They would follow the rules like all the others, content to trade goods and explore the few systems allowed to them. The Forbidden Gate would remain safely sealed, its terrible secrets locked away from those too weak to comprehend them. In the weeks that followed, human ships began appearing at the designated gates. They were crude vessels by Zephyrian standards, built of metal and ceramic rather than living crystal, powered by fusion reactors instead of psychic energy. Their crews were polite and followed all protocols, conducting their business efficiently and causing no trouble. But reports began filtering back from the gate stations. Human ships were scanning the gate structures extensively, their sensors, probing every surface and energy pattern. When questioned, the humans claimed they were simply trying to understand the technology better, to improve their own navigation systems. Some gate operators reported seeing human engineers taking detailed measurements of the crystal formations. Others mentioned finding small devices attached to gate control systems, devices the humans claimed were monitoring equipment for safety purposes. All very reasonable explanations, but they added up to something that made Vextaler increasingly uncomfortable. The humans were studying the gates with an intensity that no other species had ever shown. They approached the ancient technology not with reverence or fear, but with the calculating gaze of engineers looking at a problem to be solved. And problems, Vextaler knew, were things that humans seemed very good at solving. Dr. Elena Vasquez floated in zero gravity, her tools spread around her like a metallic constellation. She was inside the housing of Gate 15, the largest of the 3 gates humans were allowed to use. Her team had been working for 6 straight hours, mapping every crystal formation and energy conduit they could reach. "Elena, you need to see this," called her assistant, Dr. James Park, from across the chamber. He was holding a scanner that beeped rapidly as he moved it along one of the smaller crystal formations. Elena pushed off from the wall and drifted over to him. The scanner's display showed energy patterns that made no sense according to everything the Zephyrians had told them about gate technology. "These aren't psychic resonance patterns," Elena said, studying the readings. "This is quantum entanglement. On a massive scale. The crystals aren't responding to mental energy at all. They're creating paired particle states across galactic distances." James looked confused. "But the Zephyrians said only psychics can operate the gates. They've been controlling them for thousands of years." "Maybe they're wrong about how their own technology works," Elena replied. "Or maybe they're not telling us the whole truth." For 3 months, Elena's team had been studying the gates whenever they could get permission. Each discovery made the official Zephyrian explanation seem less likely. The gates didn't need psychic energy to function. They needed precise quantum calculations and exact frequency matching. The Zephyrians had simply evolved the ability to perform these calculations, instinctively with their minds, but humans could do the same thing with computers and machines, maybe even better. Elena activated her communication device. "Team Alpha, this is Elena. I need you to run test protocol 7. Across the gate chamber, 3 other researchers began working at a control panel they had built from human technology. It was a crude-looking device compared to the elegant Zephyrian interfaces, but it was designed to communicate with the gate using pure mathematical principles rather than mental commands. "Initiating quantum frequency scan," reported Dr. Sarah Kim, "looking for entanglement markers in the primary crystal matrix." The gate began to hum more loudly. The blue light that always surrounded it started to pulse in a new rhythm. Elena watched her instruments with growing excitement. The gate was responding to their electronic signals just as well as it responded to Zephyrian psychic commands. "Elena," James whispered, "are you thinking what I think you're thinking?" She nodded, slowly. "If we can interface with the gates directly, without needing psychic ability, then we're not limited to the 3 gates they assigned us. We could access any gate in the network." It was a dangerous thought. The Zephyrians had made it very clear that unauthorized gate use would result in humanity losing all access privileges. But Elena had always believed that knowledge was meant to be shared, not hoarded by those who happened to evolve the right mental abilities. Over the following weeks, human exploration ships began appearing in star systems that should have been unreachable to them. When Zephyrian patrol vessels demanded explanations, the human captains always had reasonable answers. Navigation errors, equipment malfunctions, solar storms that had thrown them off course. Captain Maria Santos was particularly good at this. When her ship, the UES Discovery, was found scanning a Zephyrian military installation 3 systems away from the nearest authorized gate, she looked genuinely surprised. "Navigation error?" asked Commander Tylvan, his scales flickering between yellow and orange with suspicion. "Our computer systems are still adapting to gate travel," Santos explained with a perfectly straight face. "Sometimes we end up in the wrong place. Very embarrassing." "Your ship's course logs show direct gate-to-gate travel with no stops," Tylvan pointed out. Santos shrugged. "Must be another computer glitch. You know how primitive our technology is compared to yours?" But Tylvan had been watching human ships for weeks now, and he was starting to notice patterns. They always seemed to have navigation errors that took them to strategically interesting locations. They always had equipment malfunctions that required them to conduct detailed scans of Zephyrian facilities. And they always had perfectly innocent explanations that were almost impossible to disprove. Meanwhile, back on the human research station, Elena was making even more disturbing discoveries. Her team had managed to hack into the gate network's communication protocols, and what they found challenged everything the Zephyrians claimed about the ancient technology. "The gates aren't just transportation devices," Elena explained to the assembled human leadership via secure communication. "They're part of a vast information network. Every time someone uses a gate, data flows through the entire system." The Zephyrians have been monitoring every conversation, every cargo manifest, every passenger list of every species that uses the network. Admiral Rebecca Hayes, commanding officer of the Human Exploration Fleet, leaned forward on the screen. "Are you saying they're spying on everyone?" "Not just spying," Elena replied. "They're controlling information flow throughout the galaxy. They decide which species learn about which technologies, which planets get access to which trade routes, which civilizations rise and which ones stagnate. They're not just guardians of the gates. They're puppet masters pulling strings across the entire galaxy." The revelation sent shockwaves through human leadership. They had known the Zephyrians were controlling access to the gates, but they hadn't realized the extent of that control. The gate network wasn't just about transportation. It was about power on a galactic scale. "There's more," Elena continued. "I've been analyzing the data flows, and there are signals coming from a source that's not on any star charts, something the Zephyrians call the Nexus Void. The signals are incredibly complex, like they're carrying massive amounts of information, but the Zephyrians have been blocking access to whatever is sending them." Admiral Hayes was quiet for a long moment. "Are you talking about the Forbidden Gate?" "I think so. And I think the Zephyrians have been lying about what's on the other side." The meeting ended with new orders for all human ships. "Continue the exploration program, but be more careful about getting caught. Gather as much information as possible about the gate network and Zephyrian control systems. And most importantly, find out what the Zephyrians were really hiding behind the Forbidden Gate." Captain Santos was given a special assignment. Her ship was equipped with Elena's latest quantum interface technology and sent to conduct long-range scans of the Forbidden Gate from a safe distance. What she found there made her call for an immediate conference with human leadership. "The gate isn't dead," she reported. "It's not some dangerous relic like the Zephyrians claim. It's active, but it's being suppressed somehow. There are artificial barriers around it, both physical and electronic. The Zephyrians aren't protecting us from the gate. They're protecting the gate from us." Admiral Hayes studied the scan data Santos had transmitted. The Forbidden Gate was surrounded by a massive fleet of Zephyrian warships, sensor buoys, and what looked like jamming equipment. It was the most heavily defended location in known space. Why would they guard a dead gate so heavily? Hayes wondered, aloud. Elena had been thinking about the same question. Because it's not dead. Because whatever is on the other side is something they don't want anyone else to find. And because they're afraid that if other species learn the truth about the gates, their whole empire of control will come crashing down. The humans began to plan. If the Zephyrians were hiding something important behind the Forbidden Gate, then humanity needed to find out what it was, not just for curiosity's sake, but for the sake of every species that had been kept ignorant and controlled by Zephyrian manipulation. But getting past the most heavily defended location in the galaxy would require more than just clever navigation, errors, and innocent explanations. It would require the one thing humans had always been good at, doing the impossible when everyone said it couldn't be done. The question wasn't whether they could reach the Forbidden Gate. The question was what they would find when they got there. High Custodian Vextalar's scales had turned a deep red that remained constant for days. His advisors knew this was a bad sign. When the High Custodian stayed angry for extended periods, it usually meant someone was about to face serious consequences. The source of his anger was becoming clearer each day. Human ships were being detected in restricted areas with increasing frequency. What had started as occasional navigation errors was now happening multiple times per week. Worse, the humans were no longer content to simply observe from a distance. They were actively scanning Zephyrian installations, probing gate control systems, and asking uncomfortable questions about technologies that had been classified for millennia. "Show me the latest reports," Vextalar demanded. Commander Zix then activated the holographic display. Red markers appeared throughout Zephyrian space, each one representing a human vessel that had been found where it shouldn't be. In the past month, we have intercepted human ships in 47 restricted systems, Zix then reported. They claim mechanical failures, but our technical analysts believe they are using some form of advanced gate manipulation technology. Advanced? Vextalar's voice carried a dangerous edge. They are a primitive species with no psychic abilities. How could they possibly develop advanced gate technology? We don't know, sir, but some of our gate operators have reported unusual energy signatures when human ships pass through. The patterns are different from what we expect. The holographic display shifted to show energy readings from various gates. The normal Zephyrian patterns were smooth and flowing, like mental thoughts made visible. The human patterns were sharp and mathematical, like machine calculations translated into energy. They're not using psychic interfaces at all, Vextalar realized. They found another way to control the gates. This was more than just troubling. It was potentially catastrophic. The entire Zephyrian power structure was based on their exclusive ability to properly interface with gate technology. If other species learned that psychic ability wasn't necessary, if they discovered that the gates could be controlled through purely technological means, then the hegemony's 3,000-year reign would end overnight. But the worst news was yet to come. Sir, Zix then said carefully, we have detected human vessels conducting long-range scans of the Forbidden Gate perimeter. The temperature in the command center seemed to drop. Every Zephyrian present felt their scales tighten with instinctive fear. The Forbidden Gate was not just restricted territory, it was forbidden for the safety of all sentient life in the galaxy. How close? Vextalar asked in a voice like grinding stone. They maintain distance outside our patrol perimeter, but their scanning equipment appears to be more sophisticated than we initially assessed. They may have gathered significant data about the gate's energy signatures. Vextalar closed his large eyes and tried to calm himself. The humans didn't understand what they were playing with. The Forbidden Gate wasn't just another transportation device. It was a gateway to horrors that had destroyed the most advanced civilization the galaxy had ever known. The gate builders had been powerful beyond imagination, capable of manipulating space and time itself, and they had all died screaming. Summon. The human ambassador, Vextalar ordered. Immediately! Ambassador Chen arrived within hours, her small shuttle docking with the Hegemony command station without fanfare. She entered the audience chamber with the same calm confidence she had shown during their first meeting, seemingly unaware of the fury radiating from every Zephyrian present. High Custodian, she said with a polite bow. You asked to see me? Your ships have been violating the boundaries of restricted space, Vextalar stated without preamble. This ends now. Chen's expression didn't change. I'm not aware of any violations. If our navigation systems have been experiencing errors, I apologize. As I mentioned before, we're still adapting to gate travel. Do not insult my intelligence, Vextalar's voice boomed through the chamber. Your ships have been conducting systematic scans of classified installations. Your crews have been probing gate control systems that are forbidden to all client species, and now you have dared to approach the Forbidden Gate itself. For the first time, Chen's calm facade showed a crack. Her eyes sharpened with interest. The Forbidden Gate? That's the large black structure we observed on our arrival, correct? What makes it so dangerous? Vextalar's scales rippled with colors of rage and fear. You will not ask questions about things that could destroy your entire species. The gate leads to the Nexus Void, a realm where reality itself is broken. The civilization that built the gates conducted experiments there that drove them all to madness and death. The psychic echoes alone have killed thousands of my people over the centuries. Chen listened to this explanation with the focused attention of someone hearing something very important. Experiments? What kind of experiments? The kind that should never be repeated, Vextalar snapped. The gate builders tried to transcend the normal limits of space and time. They built machines that could think faster than any biological mind. They created technologies that could manipulate the fundamental forces of reality, and in the end, they all died screaming as their creations turned against them. How do you know all this if the gate is forbidden? Because my ancestors were foolish enough to send expeditions through it in the early days of our guardianship. The few who returned brought back recordings of vast cities that built themselves, of machines that spoke with voices too large for any single mind to comprehend, of experiments that had torn holes in the fabric of existence itself. Every survivor went insane within months. Chen nodded thoughtfully. And you believe this realm is still dangerous? I know it is dangerous. The gate pulses with chaotic energy that responds to no known technology. Ships that approach too closely are twisted into impossible shapes. The space around it is littered with the remains of vessels from dozens of species who thought they could succeed where others had failed. Fascinating, Chen murmured. The single word sent a chill through every Zephyrian in the room. It was not the response of someone who had been properly warned about mortal danger. It was the response of someone who had just been told about something that might be worth investigating. You will guarantee that no human vessel will approach the Forbidden Gate, Vextalar demanded. You will cease all unauthorized scanning of restricted facilities. You will confine your activities to the 3 gates originally assigned to your species. If you do not agree to these terms immediately, all human access to the gate network will be revoked. Chen was quiet for a long moment, considering the ultimatum. When she finally spoke, her voice carried a tone that made Vextalar's skin crawl. Hi, Custodian, I appreciate your concern for our safety. However, humanity has a saying, forbidden fruit tastes the sweetest. We've never been very good at staying away from things just because someone told us they were dangerous. Then you are all fools who will die for your curiosity. Perhaps, Chen agreed. But we've found that most warnings about forbidden knowledge come from people who want to keep that knowledge for themselves. And we've found that the most interesting discoveries are usually hiding behind the most emphatic warnings. Vextalar felt his control slipping. The human was not responding to threats or warnings the way other species did. Where others showed fear or respect, Chen showed only polite interest and barely concealed skepticism. I will deploy our entire fleet to defend the Forbidden Gate if necessary, he warned. Any ship that approaches will be destroyed without warning. Chen smiled, and the expression was somehow more unsettling than any threat could have been. Are you certain your fleet is sufficient to stop us, High Custodian? You have 3 ships and primitive weapons, Vextalar snarled. We have 1,000 vessels equipped with weapons that can tear planets apart. That's very impressive, Chen replied, but you're assuming we would approach your blockade in a way you can see coming. The words hung in the air like a poison cloud. Vextalar stared at the small human ambassador, trying to understand what she meant. How could they approach unseen? Human ships were loud, crude things that showed up on sensors from light years away. You're bluffing, he said finally. Chen's smile widened. Am I? Tell me, High Custodian, in all your centuries of guarding the gates, have you ever encountered a species that could manipulate quantum entanglement without psychic ability? Vextalar didn't answer, because he was beginning to realize that he didn't know what humans were actually capable of. They had already demonstrated gate technology that shouldn't have been possible for a non-psychic species. They had been appearing in restricted systems despite all security measures, and now their ambassador was calmly discussing approaches that couldn't be detected. I'll give you some time to consider our position, Chen said, standing to leave. But I should mention that human curiosity is not easily deterred. The more you tell us something is forbidden, the more interesting it becomes. And the more you threaten us to stay away, the more certain we become that you're hiding something worth finding. She paused at the door and turned back with that unsettling smile. Oh, and High Custodian? You might want to check your sensor readings. The Zephyrian fleet around the Forbidden Gate was the most impressive military formation in galactic history. Over 200 warships arranged in perfect defensive patterns, their weapons trained on empty space, their sensors scanning every possible approach route. High Custodian Vextalar had positioned his command vessel at the center of the formation, determined to personally oversee the destruction of any human ship foolish enough to challenge his authority. For 3 days, the fleet maintained perfect vigilance. Every sensor sweep came back clean. Every patrol route was clear. The humans seemed to have taken his warning seriously after all. Then the alarms began screaming. "Gravitational distortion detected!" shouted the sensor operator, his scales flashing bright yellow with panic. "Massive energy surge bearing 27 Mark 5. Vextalar spun toward the main display, expecting to see the crude human ships approaching from the edge of sensor range. Instead, he saw something that made his blood freeze in his veins. The space directly inside the defensive perimeter was bending. Reality itself seemed to be folding in on itself like paper being crumpled by an invisible hand. Energy readings spiked beyond anything the sensors were designed to measure. "What is that?" Vextalar demanded. "Unknown, sir. The distortion is expanding. It's creating some kind of spatial anomaly." And then, impossible as it seemed, a human ship materialized. From nothing. Not emerging from hyperspace, not decloaking from stealth technology, but actually appearing from empty void, as if it had been there all along and the universe had simply forgotten to notice it until now. The vessel was larger than the crude human. Ships they had seen before, sleek and angular with hull plating that seemed to shift and flow like living metal. Along its sides, energy conduits pulsed with the same red and purple light that surrounded the Forbidden Gate itself. "How did they get inside our perimeter?" Vextalar roared. "They didn't, sir," the sensor operator replied in a shaking voice. "They came from somewhere else entirely. The spatial distortion reading suggests they approached through folded space-time. The human ship broadcast a message on all frequencies." The voice was calm and professional, with just a hint of excitement that made every Zephyrian listener want to flee. "Zephyrian Fleet, this is Captain Sarah Morrison of the UES Prometheus. Thank you for the warning about reality distortions, High Custodian. We found your concerns quite educational." Vextalar grabbed the communication controls with claws that shook with rage. "Human vessel, you will halt immediately and prepare to be boarded. You have violated the most sacred prohibition in galactic law." "With respect, High Custodian," Morrison replied, "we don't recognize the authority of anyone to declare knowledge. Forbidden, we've come to learn what you've been hiding." The Prometheus began moving toward the Forbidden Gate, accelerating smoothly through the defensive formation. Zephyrian warships moved to intercept, their weapons charging with deadly energy. "All ships, open fire," Vextalar commanded. The space around the Prometheus lit up with weapons fire. Energy beams that could melt asteroid hit the human ships. Hull and simply stopped. The beams didn't bounce off or get absorbed. They hit the hull and ceased to exist, as if the space around the ship was somehow different from normal space. "Impossible," whispered Commander Zix then. "Our weapons have no effect." The Prometheus continued its approach to the Forbidden Gate, apparently unharmed by the concentrated fire of the entire Zephyrian fleet. As it drew closer to the massive black structure, something unprecedented began to happen. The chaotic red and purple energy that had surrounded the Forbidden Gate for millennia began to stabilize. The angry, writhing patterns smoothed into steady pulses. The gate itself, which had always been an ominous black void, began to show depth and structure as if it were becoming transparent. "Captain Morrison," Vextalar transmitted, his voice carrying a desperation he had never felt before. "You don't understand what you're approaching. That gate has killed thousands. The realm beyond it drove our greatest explorers to madness. Whatever experiments the gate builders conducted there destroyed their entire civilization." Morrison's reply came back with barely contained excitement. "Hi, Custodian. We've been monitoring your transmissions for months. We know exactly what we're approaching, and we think you've been wrong about what's on the other side." The Prometheus reached the gate's event horizon. Instead of being torn apart by chaotic energies or twisted into impossible shapes like every other ship that had approached too closely, it caused the gate to respond in a way no Zephyrian had ever seen. The Forbidden Gate came fully online. The black crystal structure became completely transparent, revealing not the swirling void of madness the Zephyrians expected, but a vast complex of interconnected structures that stretched beyond the horizon. Cities that moved and grew as they watched, machines the size of planets working in perfect harmony, and in the distance, barely visible but unmistakably there, other ships moving between structures with purpose and intelligence. Nexus Control. "This is Captain Morrison," the human transmitted. "The gateway is responding to our approach. We're reading massive infrastructure on the other side. Active installations. The gate builders didn't go extinct. They've been waiting." Through the transparent gate, shapes began moving toward them. Not the twisted horrors the Zephyrians had expected, but sleek vessels that seemed to be built from light itself. As they approached the gate from the other side, the Prometheus received a transmission on frequencies that shouldn't have been possible to generate. The message was in perfect human English. "Welcome, problem solvers. We have been waiting for someone with your particular approach to impossible situations. Please proceed through the gateway when ready. We have much to discuss." Vextalar stared at the display in complete shock. The Forbidden Gate, the source of terror that had shaped Zephyrian policy for 3,000 years, was greeting the humans like old friends. The realm that had driven Zephyrian explorers insane was speaking to humans in their own language. "How?" he whispered. Captain Morrison's voice crackled through the communication system one more time before the Prometheus began moving through the gate. "Hi, Custodian, you were right about the psychic echoes, but you misunderstood their purpose. They weren't warnings. They were compatibility tests. The gate builders have been screening potential contact species for millennia, waiting for a race that could think beyond the limitations of their own evolution." The truth hit Vextalar like a physical blow. The psychic echoes that had driven his people mad weren't random emanations from a dead civilization. They were deliberate tests, designed to identify minds that could approach problems without preconceptions. The Zephyrians, with their powerful psychic abilities, had approached the gate with ingrained assumptions about how it should work. They expected mental interfaces, spiritual harmony, and psychic communion. When they encountered technology that operated on pure logic and mathematical principles, their minds couldn't adapt. But humans had no such preconceptions. They approached the gate as engineers, not mystics. They saw it as a puzzle to be solved, not a spiritual artifact to be revered. And most importantly, they refused to accept impossible as a final answer. The gate builders weren't destroyed by their experiments. Morrison continued as the Prometheus crossed the threshold into the other realm. They succeeded. They transcended the normal limitations of space and time. They've been waiting in a pocket dimension for a species with the right combination of curiosity, adaptability, and stubborn refusal to accept arbitrary limits. Through the transparent gate, the Zephyrian fleet watched as the Prometheus was welcomed by vessels of impossible beauty and complexity. Lightships that seemed to be made of pure energy danced around the human vessel in patterns that spoke of joy and celebration. They chose us, Vextalar realized, not because we were the most powerful or the most advanced, but because we were the most stubborn. The Forbidden Gate began to pulse with new patterns of light. Other gates throughout. The network started responding, their blue glow shifting to the same red and purple energy that now flowed smoothly around the central structure. The entire gate network was coming alive in ways the Zephyrians had never imagined possible. "Sir," Zix then reported in a stunned voice, "we're detecting new gate signatures throughout the galaxy. Dozens of them. Structures we never knew existed. are powering up and becoming visible. The gate builders hadn't just created a transportation network. They had built a vast infrastructure spanning multiple dimensions, accessible only to minds that could approach their technology without fear or preconceptions. For 3,000 years, the Zephyrians had been guarding not a dangerous relic, but the key to the greatest discovery in galactic history, and they had handed that key to the humans simply by trying to keep them away from it. As more human ships began appearing from hidden dimensions, materializing inside the defensive perimeter through methods the Zephyrians couldn't begin to understand, Vexitaler finally grasped the full scope of what had happened. The humans hadn't overcome the Zephyrian blockade. They had bypassed it entirely by learning to use the true capabilities of the gate network. They hadn't forced their way past the defenders of the Forbidden Gate. They had been invited to pass by the very beings the Zephyrian fleet hung motionless in space, their weapons silent, their crews staring in amazement at what lay beyond the now transparent Forbidden Gate. Through the crystalline portal, they could see a realm that defied everything they thought. They knew about the universe. Cities that stretched across continents moved and reshaped themselves as they watched. Structures that seemed to be built from pure mathematics rose and fell according to patterns too complex for biological minds to fully grasp. And everywhere, ships of impossible design moved with purpose between installations that dwarfed anything in known space. Captain Morrison's voice crackled through the communication system from the other side of the gate. "High Custodian Vexitaler, I'm transmitting what we're seeing here. I think you need to understand what your people have been guarding all these centuries." The main display filled with images that made even the most experienced Zephyrian explorers gasp in wonder. The gate. Builders' civilization hadn't been destroyed by their experiments. It had been perfected. They had learned to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously, building structures that stretched across space and time like living bridges between realities. "The beings here call themselves the architects," Morrison reported. "They've been waiting for a species that could approach their technology without the limitations of evolutionary preconceptions. They say the psychic echoes your people experienced weren't random emissions. They were tests." An image appeared on the screen showing massive crystalline structures that pulsed with the same energy as the gates. These weren't ruins or abandoned experiments. They were active installations, tended by beings of pure energy who moved between dimensions as easily as walking through doorways. "Every species that evolved psychic abilities approaches their technology with the same assumptions," Morrison continued. "You expect mental interfaces, spiritual connections, harmony between mind and machine. But the architects built their technology on pure logic and mathematical principles. When psychic species try to interface with their systems, the contradiction between expectation and reality creates a feedback loop that damages the mind." Vexitaler felt his understanding of 3,000 years of history crumbling around him. The madness that had claimed Zephyrian explorers hadn't been caused by exposure to horrors beyond comprehension. It had been caused by their own minds rejecting technology that worked differently than they expected. "Humans don't have that problem," Morrison explained. "We approach unknown technology as engineers, not mystics. We don't have preconceptions about how things should work based on our evolutionary gifts. We just try to figure out how they actually do work." Through the gate, more human ships were arriving. Not the crude vessels the Zephyrians had grown accustomed to seeing, but sleek craft that seemed to incorporate architect technology into their designs. They moved through space in ways that suggested mastery of physics the Zephyrians had never imagined. "The architects have been waiting for millions of years," Morrison continued. "They knew that eventually evolution would produce a species with the right combination of curiosity, adaptability, and stubborn refusal to accept arbitrary limitations. They designed the gate network as a test, knowing that only the right kind of minds would be able to unlock its true potential." One of the energy beings approached the communication array. When it spoke, its voice seemed to come from everywhere at once, carrying harmonics that spoke directly to the listener's understanding. Guardians of the lesser gates, it said, addressing the Zephyrian fleet, you have served your purpose well. For millennia, you have protected the network from species that were not ready for the full truth. But the time of guardianship is ending. The inheritors have arrived. Vextalar found his voice at last. Inheritors. You mean the humans. We mean the problem solvers, the being replied. Evolution rarely produces minds that can think beyond their own limitations. Most species become trapped by their own gifts, unable to imagine solutions that don't match their natural abilities. But occasionally, rarely, evolution creates a species that refuses to accept the impossible. The display showed scenes from throughout human history. Humans building flying machines despite having no wings. Humans diving to the deepest parts of their oceans despite having no gills. Humans traveling to space despite being evolved for life on a single planet. Again and again, humans had overcome natural limitations through pure, stubborn determination to find solutions. Your species approached our technology with reverence and caution, the architect continued. This is natural for beings who have evolved powerful mental gifts. You assumed the gates required psychic ability because that was how your minds worked. But these humans approached our technology with curiosity and skepticism. They tested. They experimented. They refused to accept our barriers as permanent. More human ships were emerging from dimensional folds that the Zephyrians hadn't even known existed. Each one incorporated more advanced technology, as if humanity was learning and adapting at an incredible rate. How long have they known? Vextalar asked. Captain Morrison answered from her position inside the architect realm. We suspected something was wrong with the official story from the beginning. The energy patterns didn't match psychic emanations. The quantum signatures suggested technology far more advanced than anything we'd seen, but it was Dr. Elena Vasquez who figured out that the gates were compatibility tests. The display shifted to show Elena's research station, where human scientists were working alongside architect beings to unlock technologies that had been dormant for millennia. Gate after gate throughout the galaxy was coming online, revealing installations and capabilities that had been hidden for eons. The architects didn't retreat to another dimension because their experiments failed. Elena's voice joined the conversation. They retreated because they succeeded too well. They learned to manipulate space and time so completely that they could no longer interact safely with species that were still bound by normal physics. They've been waiting for a species advanced enough to learn from them, but flexible enough to adapt to their way of thinking. Vextalar watched as the galaxy transformed around him. Gates that had been simple transportation devices were revealing themselves as nodes in a vast network of computational power that spanned multiple dimensions. Planets that had seemed empty were showing signs of hidden installations that had been camouflaged for millions of years. What happens to us? He asked. What happens to the hegemony? The human response was surprisingly gentle. Nothing happens to you that you don't choose. Ambassador Chen's voice joined the conversation as her ship appeared through a dimensional fold. The architects don't conquer or control. They invite cooperation from those willing to learn. The galaxy is large enough for many different approaches to existence. But even as she spoke the diplomatic words, Vextalar could see the truth. The age of Zephyrian dominance was over, not because they had been defeated in battle, but because they had been obsoleted by progress. Humans weren't just accessing the gate network now. They were expanding it, improving it, and sharing it with other species who had been restricted by Zephyrian control. The gates were never yours to control, the architect explained. They were always meant to be shared. You became guardians because you were the first to find them and the first to develop the discipline necessary to use them safely. But guardianship was always meant to be temporary. Throughout the galaxy, species that had been limited to their Home systems for centuries were suddenly receiving invitations to join the expanded gate network. The artificial restrictions that had kept civilizations isolated and dependent on Zephyrian approval were dissolving like morning mist. "You could have been partners in this," Chen said. "If you had approached us with openness instead of suspicion, if you had shared knowledge instead of hoarding it, humans and Zephyrians could have worked together to unlock these secrets. But you chose to maintain control through secrecy and intimidation." Vextler felt the weight of 3,000 years of policy errors crushing down on him. The hegemony had been so focused on maintaining their position as gatekeepers that they had never considered the possibility that they were keeping themselves from the greatest discovery in galactic history. "What do we do now?" he asked quietly. "You learn," Morrison replied from the architect realm. "You adapt. You let go of the need to control everything and start participating in something bigger than any single species could accomplish alone." As if to demonstrate her point, one of the architect beings approached the Zephyrian fleet. Its form shifted from pure energy to something more recognizable, taking on aspects that resembled both Zephyrian and human characteristics. "Your psychic gifts are not limitations," it explained. "They are simply one approach among many. In the expanded network, there will be need for intuitive minds as well as analytical ones. The universe is complex enough to require many different types of intelligence working together." The final transmission came from Dr. Elena Vasquez, speaking from deep within the architect installations. "High Custodian, your people spent 3,000 years protecting the galaxy from knowledge they thought was too dangerous to share. But the real danger was never the knowledge."
The sun rose slowly over the hills of Proxima Beta, casting a warm glow across the wheat fields surrounding the colony of New Eden. Abigail Ross stood at the edge of the main settlement, a cup of coffee warming her hands as she watched the farmers begin their morning work. After 15 years, the colony had grown from a collection of prefabricated shelters to a thriving community of 5,000 people. "Morning, Governor," called a voice behind her. Abigail turned to see Captain Eric Mitchell approaching. His uniform was crisp despite the early hour, and the small security badge on his chest glinted in the sunlight. "I keep telling you to call me Abigail," she said with a smile. "Any news from the outer farms?" All quiet. Johnson's team finished setting up the new irrigation system in Sector 7. Mitchell fell into step beside her as they walked toward the administration building. "Hard to believe we're coming up on the 15th anniversary. Sometimes I forget we're 24 light years from Earth," Abigail said. "This place feels like home now." The colony was a model of efficiency and peace. Though technically it fell under Earth's military protection, the security detail consisted of only 30 personnel led by Captain Mitchell. Their job was mainly to handle the occasional wild animal problem or help during weather emergencies. Inside the administration building, Dr. Peter Gonzalez was already at work in the communications center. His dark hair was messy, and empty coffee cups surrounded his workstation. "You been here all night, Pete?" Mitchell asked. "Lost track of time. I've been upgrading our deep space monitoring system." He yawned and stretched. "Should give us better warning of solar flares now." Abigail was about to respond when a soft alarm began to ping from one of the screens. "What's that?" she asked, moving closer. Peter's fingers flew across the keyboard. Something just entered the system, moving fast. His expression changed from curiosity to concern. Really fast. Like nothing I've seen before. Mitchell leaned over his shoulder. "Military vessel? Unknown configuration. Not matching any Earth or Allied signatures." Peter adjusted some settings. "I'm picking up 7 large objects. Try hailing them on standard frequencies," Abigail said, her stomach tightening with worry. For the next hour, Peter attempted every known communication protocol while Mitchell alerted his security team. The objects continued their approach toward Proxima Beta, maintaining complete silence. "Governor, I recommend we activate emergency protocols," Mitchell said quietly. Before Abigail could respond, the entire building shook. A distant boom echoed across the colony. What was that? Abigail steadied herself against the wall. Peter's face went pale as he stared at his screen. They just destroyed the Westfield farm dome. No warning. Mitchell immediately grabbed his communicator. All security personnel, battle stations. This is not a drill. Civilians to shelter locations immediately. Abigail watched in horror as additional explosions lit up the horizon. The alien ships, for that was clearly what they were, had spread out and were systematically targeting the outlying structures of the colony. "We need to get a message to Earth," she said. Peter nodded, already working on the emergency transmission. The main communications array should be powerful enough, but it'll take time for the message to reach them. "How much time do we have?" Mitchell asked as his communicator buzzed with reports of damage and casualties. "The alien vessels will be over the main settlement in 20 minutes at their current speed," Peter said. Outside, the colony's warning sirens began to wail. Civilians ran for the designated shelter areas while security personnel set up defensive positions. Mitchell coordinated his small team as best he could, but their weapons had been designed for peacekeeping, not war. "The message is ready," Peter said. "But I don't know if..." Another explosion rocked the building closer this time. The lights flickered and went out, emergency systems coming online with a dull red glow. "Send it now," Abigail ordered. Peter activated the transmission. The powerful signal burst from the colony's main array, carrying their desperate plea for help across the vast distance to Earth. "Message away," he confirmed. Mitchell returned from coordinating the evacuation of the eastern sector. His uniform was now dusty, and a cut above his eye trickled blood. "We've got civilians moving to the underground shelters, but we're not going to be able to hold them off for long." Through the windows they could now see the alien ships. They were oddly shaped, like giant arrowheads with pulsing lights along their hulls. Smaller craft were detaching from the main vessels, descending toward the colony. "What do they want?" Abigail whispered. No one had an answer. The next few hours passed in a blur of chaos. The colony's small security force fought bravely, but was hopelessly outmatched. The aliens deployed ground troops, tall, armored figures that moved with frightening speed and precision. They systematically disabled the colony's power grid and captured key infrastructure. In the communications center, now running on emergency power, Peter worked frantically to maintain contact with the scattered security teams while Abigail coordinated the civilian shelters. "We've lost contact with sectors 3 through 6, Peter reported grimly. "The aliens are moving toward the central plaza." Mitchell returned with the remains of his security team. "We've set up a final defensive line around the shelter entrances. We'll hold them as long as we can." "Did the message get through?" Abigail asked Peter. "Confirmed transmission, but no way to know if Earth received it." A violent explosion shook the building, sending ceiling panels crashing down. When the dust cleared, Mitchell was already organizing the evacuation of the communication center. "We need to move to the emergency bunker," he said. "This position is compromised." As they hurried through the corridors, Abigail looked out a window and froze at the sight before her. The beautiful colony that had been her home for 15 years was now a landscape of fire and smoke. Alien ships hovered over the destruction like predatory birds. In the distance, she could see colonists being rounded up by the alien forces. "They're taking prisoners," she said, her voice hollow, "which means they want something from us." Mitchell replied, "That gives us time." In the emergency bunker deep beneath the Colonial Administration building, the survivors gathered. Of the 5,000 colonists, only a few hundred had made it to this final refuge. Outside, the sounds of battle were fading as the colony's defenses crumbled. Peter managed to restore a small communications terminal. "I've got a weak signal. Still trying to reach any off-world outposts." Abigail looked around at the frightened faces of her people, children crying softly against their parents' shoulders, the wounded being tended to with dwindling medical supplies, the exhausted security personnel checking their nearly depleted weapons. "What happens now?" someone asked. Mitchell and Abigail exchanged a glance. "Now," Mitchell said, "we wait for Earth to respond, and they will respond." "How can you be so sure?" asked a frightened colonist. Mitchell's face hardened. "Because we're human, and humans protect their own." Outside, the aliens continued their systematic occupation of the colony, unaware that their attack on this seemingly simple outpost had just awakened the full might of humanity's war machine. 24 Light. Years away, Abigail's distress call was about to reach Earth. Admiral Susan Taylor stood perfectly still as the fragmented message played on the large screen of Earth Defense Command's Central Operations Room. The static-filled plea for help from the Proxima Beta colony cut in and out, but the sounds of explosions and panic were unmistakable. "Play it again," she ordered, her voice steady despite the cold anger building inside her. As the message repeated, officers and analysts around the room remained silent. When it ended, Admiral Taylor turned to her staff. "How old is this message, Lieutenant?" Commander Alan Parker, her chief intelligence officer, stepped forward. 24 days, ma'am. That's how long it took to reach us from Proxima Beta. Which means whatever happened there has been going on for over 3 weeks, she said. "Options?" "The 7th Fleet is closest to the jump point," said her second-in-command. "We can have ships ready to move in 6 hours." Admiral Taylor nodded. "Make it 4, and get me the defense secretary." Within the hour, every military installation in the solar system was on high alert. For the first time in 50 years, Earth faced an unknown alien threat. In orbit above Mars, the massive shipyards that had been operating at minimal capacity suddenly surged with activity. Mothballed warships were quickly reactivated and prepared for service. In the White House Situation Room, Defense Secretary Frank Miller addressed the emergency session of Earth's unified government. "We have limited information, but what we know is this. An unidentified alien force has attacked our colony on Proxima Beta without provocation. We must assume the worst and prepare accordingly." "How serious is this threat?" asked one of the council members. Miller's face was grim. Proxima Beta had minimal defenses. It was a peaceful agricultural colony. If these aliens could overwhelm it so quickly, they represent a significant military power. "What do we know about them?" another counselor asked. "Almost nothing," Miller admitted. "That's why the first response must include both military and intelligence resources." The vote was unanimous. For the first time since its creation, the full might of Earth's military-industrial complex would be unleashed. On the orbital station above Earth, Captain Olivia Wright received her orders directly from Admiral Taylor. Her ship, the USS Defender, would be the first to respond. "Your mission is reconnaissance, Captain," the Admiral explained. "Get to Proxima Beta, assess the situation, and report back before the main fleet arrives." Captain Wright studied the mission details on her tablet. "We'll need to approach with extreme caution. If these aliens have control of the colony's defense systems, they'll see us coming." "That's why I chose the Defender," Admiral Taylor said. "Your stealth systems are the best in the fleet. The Defender was a marvel of human engineering. Though relatively small compared to the main battleships, it was equipped with the most advanced cloaking technology ever developed. Its crew of 100 was handpicked from the best officers in the service. 12 hours later, the sleek vessel slipped away from its docking station and headed toward the jump point near Neptune's orbit. From there, it would make the faster-than-light jump to the Proxima system. Captain Wright gathered her senior officers in the ship's briefing room. "We know very little about what we're facing," she told them. "Our priority is to gather intelligence without being detected. We need to learn the enemy's capabilities, numbers, and intentions." Her tactical officer, Lieutenant Ben Foster, asked, "What about survivors? The colony had 5,000 people." "If there are survivors, we'll locate them," Wright replied. "But we cannot engage the enemy unless absolutely necessary. The main fleet is 3 days behind us." The ship's AI displayed the layout of the Proxima Beta colony on the main screen. "Our approach will take us behind the system's outer planets. From there, we'll use passive sensors only." Wright pointed to locations on the map. "We'll deploy stealth drones to get visual confirmation of the situation on the ground. 3 days. Later, the Defender emerged from its jump on the far side of the Proxima system. The ship immediately activated its stealth systems and began a slow, careful approach toward the colony planet. On the bridge, Captain Wright watched the sensor readings with growing concern. "Multiple large vessels in orbit," reported her sensor officer. "Configuration unknown." "Get me visual," Wright ordered. The main screen showed 7 large ships unlike anything in Earth's records. They were angular and dark, with strange protrusions that might be weapons or sensors. "Are they detecting us?" Wright asked. "Negative, Captain. Our stealth systems are holding." As the Defender moved closer to the planet, they deployed their reconnaissance drones. The images they sent back turned the mood on the bridge from tense to somber, where the thriving colony of New Eden had once stood. Much of it was now in ruins. The central administration building had been partially destroyed. Many of the agricultural domes were shattered. The aliens had established what appeared to be processing centers in several locations. "They're keeping the colonists alive," Lieutenant Foster noted as they watched footage of humans being marched between buildings. "As prisoners or slaves," Wright said grimly. "Magnify that section." The image zoomed in on a group of aliens supervising the human captives. They were tall, with an almost insect-like appearance. Their bodies were covered in what might be natural armor or technological suits. "Send all this back to Admiral Taylor," Wright ordered, "and continue surveillance. I want to know every detail about their operations before the fleet arrives." For the next 24 hours, the Defender's drones mapped the alien presence across the colony. They identified prison camps, landing zones, and what appeared to be mining operations in the hills beyond the settlement. In one area, they discovered something unexpected: signs of resistance. A small group of colony security personnel had escaped the initial attack and were hiding in the forest, occasionally striking against alien patrols. "They're still fighting," Wright said with admiration as she reviewed the footage. Lieutenant Commander Garcia, her communications officer, approached with news. "Captain, we've detected a weak signal from the surface. It's using one of our emergency frequencies. Can you isolate it?" "Working on it now." Minutes later, they heard a scratchy voice. "This is Captain Eric Mitchell of Proxima Beta Security. Any Earth forces, please respond." Wright looked at her officers, then nodded. "Send a tight beam response. Let them know help is coming." As the Defender maintained its hidden position, the main Earth fleet was preparing to jump. 50 warships, led by Admiral Taylor's flagship, were armed with weapons that hadn't been used in generations. Thousands of Marines prepared for ground assault. Scientists and engineers worked around the clock to analyze the limited data on the alien technology. In her quarters, Captain Wright recorded her report to Admiral Taylor. The aliens appear to be using the colony for resource extraction. They've enslaved the survivors but don't seem interested in killing them. Their technology is advanced, but preliminary analysis suggests our weapons may be effective against their defenses. Most importantly, they seem completely unaware that a response is coming. She paused, then added, "They attacked what they thought was a simple farming colony. They have no idea what they've awakened." Lieutenant Zach Nelson crouched behind the remains of a collapsed storage building on the edge of what used to be New Eden's main settlement. His Special Forces team of 6 soldiers had made planetfall 3 hours earlier, dropped from the USSE, Defender and stealth pods designed to evade alien detection. "Movement at 2 o'clock, whispered Sergeant Kim Rivera, the team's scout. Through her advanced scope, she tracked an alien patrol moving along the perimeter fence of a labor camp. "How many?" Nelson asked. 4. Same pattern as the last group. Nelson checked his tactical display. The alien guards moved with machine-like precision, following the exact same route at precisely timed intervals. This made them predictable, which was good for his team's mission. "We need to get inside that compound," he said. "Captain Mitchell's resistance group should be somewhere in the northern sector." For 3 days, the 7th Fleet had assembled at the jump point while Admiral Taylor finalized her strategy. The first phase called for special forces to infiltrate the colony and connect with any organized resistance. Lieutenant Nelson's team was the tip of the spear. As darkness fell over the ruined colony, Nelson led his team toward the labor camp's blind spot they had identified. The aliens relied heavily on technology for security, but seemed to lack the human instinct for covering all angles. "Ready with the scrambler," Nelson ordered. Private Sam Wilson removed a small device from his pack and activated it. The device emitted a targeted pulse designed to disrupt the alien sensor grid for exactly 45 seconds, just enough time for the team to cut through the fence and slip inside. "Go, go, go," Nelson whispered as the alien security lights flickered. The team moved swiftly through the opening and into the shadows between rows of prefabricated shelters where colonists were housed. From inside, they could hear the sounds of exhausted humans settling down after a day of forced labor. "Life signs ahead," Sergeant Rivera reported, checking her scanner. "One of them matches the profile we're looking for." They approached a shelter that appeared slightly different from the others. Two team members took up defensive positions while Nelson and Rivera prepared to make contact. Nelson tapped a coded sequence on the shelter door, an old Earth military pattern that Captain Mitchell would recognize. After a moment of silence, an answering tap came from inside. The door cracked open and a woman's face appeared. She held a makeshift weapon, a sharpened piece of metal, ready to strike. "Earth Defense Command," Nelson said quietly, showing his insignia. "We're looking for Captain Mitchell." The woman's eyes widened. "You came," she whispered, lowering her weapon. "You actually came." She opened the door further, revealing a cramped space where several people huddled around a small power cell. One man stepped forward. His face was gaunt with a healing scar across his cheek, but his eyes were alert and determined. "Captain Eric Mitchell," he said. "Never thought I'd be so happy to see a lieutenant in my life." Inside the shelter, Lisa Howard, the woman who had answered the door, explained that she had been a security officer before the invasion. She and Mitchell had managed to organize a small resistance network among the prisoners. "We have about 30 people we can trust," Mitchell said. "Been sabotaging their equipment when we can, gathering intelligence and looking for weaknesses." Nelson shared the fleet's plans. "Admiral Taylor is preparing a counterattack, but we need more information about their capabilities. Our scans can only tell us so much." Mitchell nodded. "We've learned a few things. These aliens, they call themselves the Vraxians. They're overconfident. They think we're just a small outpost with no military significance." "That works in our favor," Nelson said. Lisa added, "They've been interrogating Governor Ross and our scientists, trying to learn about Earth. But they don't understand distances or scale. When told how far away Earth is, they assumed it must be a minor colony world itself." "Where are they keeping the governor?" Nelson asked. "Command center. The old administration building," Mitchell replied. "But that's not our priority target." He unfolded a crude map drawn on a piece of fabric. "They've set up their main communications array here, on the North Ridge. It's how they're staying in contact with their fleet." Nelson studied the map. "If we take out that array, they can't call for reinforcements," Lisa finished. In orbit above Proxima Beta, Captain Olivia Wright received the update from Nelson's team. She immediately relayed the information to Admiral Taylor, who was now just hours away with the main fleet. "The aliens don't know what's coming, Admiral," Wright reported. "Lieutenant Nelson's team is in position and working with the resistance to disable their communications array." "Perfect," Taylor responded. "Proceed with Operation First Strike. Draw their attention to your position but avoid taking heavy damage. We need to understand their weapons capabilities." Captain Wright gathered her crew. "We're going to engage a patrol group of Vraxian vessels. Our goal is to test their defenses and response time, then withdraw before they can bring their full force to bear." The USS Defender decloaked near one of the smaller alien patrol groups, 3 ships maintaining a standard orbit. Before the Vraxians could react, the Defender fired a precision volley that disabled the engines of the lead vessel. The alien ships responded with energy weapons that glanced off the Defender's shields. "Analysis?" Wright demanded as her ship banked sharply away from the return fire. "Their weapons are powerful but slower to target than ours," reported her tactical officer. "Shield impact at 60% of projected strength." "Good news," Wright said with a grim smile. "Our defenses are holding better than expected." As the Defender continued its hit-and-run attack, drawing more Vraxian ships away from their main fleet, Lieutenant Nelson's team reached the ridge overlooking the alien communications array. Captain Mitchell's resistance fighters had joined them, bringing their total force to 20. Those guards changed shift in 3 minutes, Lisa Howard said, checking her stolen alien timepiece. That's our window. Nelson nodded to his demolition expert. Set the charges for maximum effect. We want this thing completely offline. As they waited for the perfect moment to strike, Nelson's communications officer received an encrypted message. Lieutenant, the main fleet has entered the system. Admiral Taylor says to proceed at will. Nelson smiled. Right on schedule. He turned to Mitchell and the resistance fighters. Today we take back your home. On the other side of the planet, the space around the jump point suddenly warped and distorted as 50 Earth warships materialized in perfect formation. At their center, Admiral Taylor's flagship, the massive USS Constitution, dwarfed everything around it. All ships report ready, Admiral, her second-in-command announced. Begin Phase 2, Taylor ordered. Deploy fighters and move to engagement range. Hundreds of smaller craft launched from the Earth ships, speeding toward the Vraxian fleet that was now scrambling to respond to this unexpected threat. Back on the planet's surface, Nelson gave the signal. His team moved silently toward the communications array, taking down the guards with precision strikes. The resistance fighters, though less trained, fought with the passion of those defending their home. As they placed the final explosive charges, a general alarm sounded across the alien positions. They've spotted the fleet, Mitchell said. Nelson activated the detonator. Too late for them to call home now. The communications array exploded in a blinding flash, sending debris raining across the hillside. At the same moment, Earth's fleet engaged the Vraxian ships in orbit. The first true battle for Proxima Beta had begun. General Keith Daniels stood at the viewport of the massive troop carrier as it descended through the atmosphere of Proxima Beta. Below him, the battle for the colony's main settlement was already well underway. Earth fighters swarmed around the larger Vraxian ships, while ground forces secured landing zones for the incoming troops. 2 minutes to touchdown, sir, his aide reported. Daniels nodded. After 3 months of preparation, the full might of Earth's military had arrived at Proxima Beta. Behind his ship came hundreds more carrying tanks, artillery, and over 50,000 soldiers. All unit commanders, final check, he ordered over the secure channel. Remember, priority 1 is securing civilian safety zones. The carrier touched down with a slight bump in a cleared area 2 miles from the main settlement. Ramps lowered, and soldiers poured out, taking defensive positions as more ships landed nearby. Within minutes, the landscape transformed into a mobile human fortress. In orbit above them, Admiral Taylor directed the space battle from the USS Constitution. The Vraxian fleet, though technologically advanced, had been caught unprepared by the sheer scale of the human response. Target their command vessel, Taylor ordered. All batteries, coordinated fire. From dozens of Earth ships, energy beams and projectiles converged on the largest Vraxian vessel. Its shields flared brightly, then failed under the concentrated assault. The alien ship listed to one side, venting atmosphere. They're retreating to the far side of the moon, reported her tactical officer. Don't pursue yet, Taylor ordered. Focus on clearing the orbital space above our landing zones. On the planet's surface, Lieutenant Nelson's team had linked up with General Daniels' forward command post. After 3 months of guerrilla operations, Nelson's uniform was tattered, and his face was weather-beaten, but his eyes showed fierce determination. The resistance network has grown, he reported to Daniels. We have over 500 colonists ready to fight alongside our forces. Good work, Lieutenant, Daniels said. What about the civilian population? Most are being held in 3 main labor camps. Nelson indicated the locations on a holographic map. Captain Mitchell's people have been preparing them for our arrival. When we move on the camps, they'll be ready for evacuation. Daniels studied the map. The Vraxians have concentrated their ground forces here, in the center of the settlement. That's our primary objective. They've fortified the old administration building, Nelson added. That's where they're holding Governor Ross and other colony leaders. As they finalized their attack plan, Lisa Howard arrived with fresh intelligence. After months of resistance work, she now wore a makeshift uniform with Earth's military insignia that Nelson had given her. "Their commander is getting desperate," she reported. "Since you destroyed their long-range communications, they haven't been able to contact their homeworld. They're moving all their remaining forces to defend their central position, playing right into our hands," Daniels said. "Let's move out." Across the settlement, Earth's forces advanced methodically. The human soldiers moved with a discipline and coordination that surprised the Vraxian defenders. Earth's military had spent 3 months studying the enemy, developing specific weapons and tactics to counter their advantages. In the southern labor camp, Dr. Peter Gonzalez helped organize the evacuating colonists as Earth Marines secured the perimeter. During his captivity, he had secretly studied the aliens' technology, passing valuable information to Nelson's team. "This way," he called to a group of families. "The transport ships are waiting." A small girl looked up at the enormous Earth vessels landing nearby. "Are those all from home?" she asked in wonder. "Yes," Peter said, smiling for the first time in months. "Earth sent every ship they could find to bring us back." At the main Vraxian position, General Daniels coordinated the final assault. Earth, tanks formed a perimeter around the old administration building, while infantry units took up positions in the surrounding structures. "All units in position," his communications officer reported. "Begin the operation," Daniels ordered. The attack came from all sides simultaneously. Earth forces had deployed special disruptor devices that interfered with the Vraxian sensor systems, leaving them effectively blind. Special forces teams led by Lieutenant Nelson breached the lower levels of the building while the main assault drew attention to the front. Inside the command center, the Vraxian commander, a tall figure with chitinous armor and 4 glowing eyes, watched in disbelief as one defense position after another fell to the humans. "How is this possible?" he demanded of his subordinates. "These are just colonists." The doors to the command center exploded inward. Earth soldiers poured through the opening, their weapons trained on the alien leaders. General Daniels entered behind them. "I am General Keith Daniels of Earth Defense." "Command," he announced. "Your forces are surrounded. Surrender now." The Vraxian commander drew himself up to his full height. "We underestimated you," he said through his translation device. "But this is merely one battle. Our empire spans dozens of star systems. When our homeworld learns of this, they will send a fleet that will darken your skies." "I look forward to meeting them," Daniels replied evenly. In a side room, Nelson's team found Governor Abigail Ross and the other colony leaders. Though thin and bearing signs of harsh treatment, Ross stood tall as the soldiers escorted her from captivity. "Lieutenant," she said, recognizing Nelson, "I knew Earth wouldn't abandon us." "Never," he affirmed. "How are you holding up, Governor?" "I'm alive," she said, her voice strengthening, "and ready to help rebuild." As the Vraxian leaders were secured, and the remaining alien forces surrendered, Admiral Taylor's voice came through on the command channel. "Ground forces, be advised. Our sensors have detected a spatial disturbance at the edge of the system. More Vraxian ships are incoming." General Daniels looked at the Vraxian commander, who made a sound that might have been laughter. "I told you," the alien said. "This is just the beginning." Daniels smiled coldly. "No, this is just our opening move." Aboard the USS Constitution, Admiral Taylor studied the incoming data. The new Vraxian fleet was larger than the first, with ships that dwarfed even her massive flagship. "Status report on all forces," she ordered. 78% of our fleet is combat ready," her second-in-command reported. "Ground forces have secured 90% of the colony. The remaining alien ground forces are surrounded and negotiating surrender terms." Taylor nodded. "Send a message to Earth Command. Operation Recovery is complete. Now beginning Operation First Contact." Her communications officer looked surprised. "First contact, ma'am? But we've been fighting them for months." "That wasn't proper contact," Taylor said. "That was pest control. Now we introduce ourselves formally to their leadership." On her command screen, The approaching Vraxian fleet appeared as dozens of red markers. Behind her own forces, represented by blue symbols, a new set of green markers began to appear as more Earth ships emerged from the jump point. The reinforcement fleet was 3 times the size of her own, with ships that had never been seen in combat before. Earth had awakened, its full war machine, and it was still just warming up. The massive view screen in the conference room of the USS Constitution displayed the approaching Vraxian armada. At the head of the long table, Admiral Susan Taylor studied the alien fleet with calm intensity. Seated around her were the key figures who had fought to reclaim Proxima Beta: General Keith Daniels, Captain Olivia Wright, Lieutenant Zach Nelson, and Governor Abigail Ross. "Their lead vessel is hailing us," reported the communications officer. "Open a channel," Taylor ordered. The screen shifted to show the Vraxian High Commander. Unlike the soldiers they had faced, this alien wore elaborate decorative armor and spoke with an air of absolute authority. "I am Supreme War Leader Krex of the Vraxian Empire," the alien announced. "You have attacked our forces and interfered with our rightful conquest. Surrender immediately or face annihilation." Admiral Taylor allowed herself a small smile. "This is Admiral Susan Taylor of Earth Defense Command. Your forces invaded our colony without provocation and enslaved our citizens. There will be no surrender today. However, I am authorized to discuss terms for your withdrawal from human space." The alien made a harsh clicking sound that the translator didn't interpret. "You misunderstand your situation. The fleet you see before you is merely the first wave. The Vraxian Empire has conquered 27 worlds. You cannot hope to resist." "Perhaps you should count again," Taylor replied calmly. At her signal, the tactical officer sent a data transmission to the Vraxian ship. It showed the full scope of human space: hundreds of colonized worlds spanning multiple star systems, massive shipyards orbiting gas giants, defense platforms around every major settlement, and thousands of warships of all sizes currently in service. "This is what you attacked," Taylor continued. "Not a remote outpost, but the farthest colony of the largest unified human government in the galaxy." On the Vraxian command ship, War Leader Krex stared at the data in silence. For the first time, doubt crept into his posture. "This cannot be accurate," he finally said. "I assure you it is," Taylor replied. "And this is what's currently arriving in this system." The view shifted to show the latest reinforcements emerging from the jump point. Hundreds of Earth vessels moved into formation, some so large they dwarfed even the Vraxian flagship. "The ship at the center," Taylor explained, "is the UES Retribution. It carries enough firepower to reduce a small moon to rubble. We have 6 more just like it." Governor Ross leaned forward. "Your initial attack killed 800 of my colonists," she said, her voice steady despite her anger. "People who were farmers, teachers, and engineers, not soldiers. They posed no threat to you." War Leader Krex shifted uncomfortably. "We believed this was a minor outpost. Our intelligence indicated no significant military presence." "That was accurate," General Daniels said. "Proxima Beta was a peaceful colony, but you failed to gather intelligence about what it was connected to. In orbit around Proxima Beta, the once ruined colony was now surrounded by Earth's military might. Repair ships had begun rebuilding the damaged structures while medical vessels treated the injured colonists. Defense platforms were being established in strategic positions throughout the system. Lieutenant Commander Alan Parker, who had been silently analyzing the Vraxian data, passed a tablet to Admiral Taylor. She reviewed his findings with interest. "Your empire," she said to Krex, "has expanded rapidly in the last 50 years, correct? You've encountered no species with significant military capability." "None that could stand against us," Krex acknowledged, some of his confidence returning. "That explains your miscalculation," Taylor said. "Humanity spent centuries fighting itself before unifying. Our military technology and tactics were forged in thousands of conflicts. When we finally achieved peace among ourselves, we maintained our defenses out of caution." She gestured to the tactical display showing both fleets. "Right now, your ships are outnumbered 3 to 1. My analysts tell me your weapons, while impressive, are no match for our latest defensive systems. This doesn't need to end in more bloodshed. War Leader Krex conferred with his subordinates off-screen. When he turned back, his posture had changed subtly. What terms do you propose? He asked. First, immediate withdrawal from the Proxima system, and all human space, Taylor said. Second, return of any human captives or remains taken from the colony. Third, reparations for the damage caused and lives lost. And in return? Krex asked. We don't pursue your fleet back to Vraxian space, Taylor said simply. We establish formal diplomatic relations instead of military ones. This becomes an unfortunate first contact incident rather than the beginning of an interstellar war. Lieutenant Nelson, who had spent months fighting the Vraxian occupation, shifted uneasily. Admiral, after what they did, Taylor raised a hand to silence him. The purpose of war, Lieutenant, is to achieve peace on favorable terms. We've demonstrated our power. Now we demonstrate our wisdom. She turned back to the screen. You have 1 hour to consider our terms, War Leader Krex. As the connection ended, General Daniels looked at Taylor with newfound respect. You're offering them a way out. I'm offering us both a way forward, she corrected. A war with the Vraxian Empire would be costly, even if we would ultimately prevail. Governor Ross nodded in agreement. My people need to rebuild, not become part of an extended conflict. An hour later, War Leader Krex returned with his answer. The Vraxian fleet would withdraw from human space immediately. Diplomatic representatives would remain behind to negotiate the details of reparations and future relations. As the alien armada began its retreat, Captain Wright asked, Do you think they'll honor the agreement? They will, Taylor said confidently. We've shown them something they've never encountered before, a species that could destroy them but chooses not to. That's a lesson that makes a lasting impression. 3 months later, Proxima Beta was well on its way to recovery. New buildings stood where ruins had been. The fields were being replanted and the colony's population had begun to grow again, as Earth sent volunteers to help rebuild. Governor Ross stood with Lieutenant Nelson on a hillside overlooking the settlement. The scars of battle were still visible, but signs of new life were everywhere. Earth is establishing a permanent defense outpost here, Nelson told her. I've been assigned as the military liaison. Good, Ross said, though I hope you won't have much to do in that capacity. The Vraxians have been keeping their distance, Nelson agreed. Word of what happened here has spread to other species in this sector. Turns out, news of humanity's response has been quite the deterrent. In the distance, construction crews were completing a new structure at the center of the colony. Unlike the utilitarian buildings around it, this one was designed as a memorial. We lost good people, Ross said quietly. Yes, Nelson agreed. But their sacrifice taught the galaxy an important lesson. What's that? She asked. Nelson looked up as Earth ships patrolled the skies above them. Never mistake kindness for weakness, and never ever attack a human colony without knowing what stands behind it.